Welcome to the NonSequitur Show. Continual watching beyond this point may result in terminal face palming and a complete loss of wokeness. You have been warned.
And welcome. Sorry for the delay. A little bit of technical problem, and then Red's had to drive home. Didn't want him, driving home super fast after a long day at work. So safety first. But anyways, this is going to be an interesting show. It is not going to be a very long one because either one or two things are going to happen. Either Rhetoric is going to fall on his knees and accept Jesus as his Lord and Savior, or he's not, because that's a dichotomy. So it's not going to be a very long episode because there's a couple things going on, but we are going to make the most of it, and we are going to have a debate or a discussion, whatever you want to prefer to be the term. But we have the amazing rocket launch expert guru of all time with us today, Rhetoric. Hi, Reds.
What's up?
And I think they can hear you. That's good, because I can hear you, and everything looks good. And we also have Josh Brister. He's been on the show before. He is, he's a master apologist of sorts, I guess. And he believes that he can actually convert Rhetoric to be Christian in real time, pretty much. Is that pretty much it?
I'll do my best.
Awesome. So this is going to be a podcast style. I don't have a camera right now that I'm using. Reds doesn't go on camera because he's ugly as hell. And Josh is tired. So we're not going to do cameras today. It's going to be you just sit back and listen and kind of just have fun with it. So anyways, one thing I do got to ask before we start, though, Reds, a lot of people don't know your actual position. I am kind of questioning it myself because I've seen you vacillate between atheist and agnostic. What do you want to go with for this discussion so we know where your starting point is?
Well, Steve, if you remember correctly, unlike you, I don't use labels. My biggest thing is that if you put a label, then there's a lot of baggage that comes with said label. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to state my actual position, and then y'all can find whatever word you want to describe it, whether it's atheist, agnostic. I really don't care.
All right. That sounds good to me. All right. I'm going to hold your feet to the fire. I did tell you this. If Josh comes up with a foolproof argument that Jesus is God and, it does exist as the Son of God and you don't accept it, I'm going to call you out on it. Got it?
Cool.
All right.
Anyway.
Have at it.
So
Josh.
You
want to start, Reds?
No, I was just gonna say my actual position. I didn't really complete the thought there. So my position is that, or better yet, it's the claim. I do not claim to know whether God does or does not exist. I make the claim that I have no idea, and that's the intellectually honest position for me to hold. The only assertion I do make is that of the arguments that I have heard so far, they leave a lot to be desired. We all remember the Rocket Ronnies and the Veckles of the world, and they leave a lot to be desired. I'm just going to say that. But that's my position, and y'all can find the word for it.
Yeah, go for it. All right. That's a starting point. Josh, take it away.
Well, I think theism, Christianity, Christian theism provides an explanation, a total explanation for all of the evidence, for all of the phenomena of lived life, from science to history, to everything in between. In fact, to be a Christian, to decide to follow Christ, because I think that's what we're discussing, you don't need to know with 100% certainty, because nothing in life is with 100% certainty outside the realm of mathematics. So I think we can have a reasonable belief that Christianity is true. And for that, I think the classical apologist would first try to argue for the existence of God based on things in nature, based on things we're acquainted with. For example, change in the world. We have to give an account of change. How does change come about? Why do things go from potential to actual? Why does that happen in the world? We can't just say they've always existed, because we can simply ask the question, why? Why does anything exist right here and now instead of nothing? In fact, for even science to be possible, we have to have the belief that the physical world can be explained. We seek explanations in everyday life for anything that we can imagine. We seek explanations. It's only when the atheist or when the radical skeptic comes to why anything exists rather than nothing, he throws up his hands and says it's a brute fact. Well, why doesn't the atheist or a radical skeptic postulate the brute fact as an answer to anything, to the explanation for anything? So if we're seeking explanations, if we're being intellectually honest and being humble, I think we have to step back and say, to account for change and the reason why anything at all exists right here and now, we're going to seek a cause that is purely actual, that has no potential for change, but that accounts for all the change that is going on in the universe. That's one of my arguments. The intelligibility of the universe also, and I'll make this short because I don't want to keep going on, because I think there's other arguments. But to even communicate intelligibly, you have to say something is of supreme intelligence, is the foundation for intelligibility, that something exists necessarily. So I think there are a number of arguments, and I'm not even discussing all of the arguments, but I think starting out, we can say that theism is a far more rational position than atheism or the radical skeptic position.
All right. Steve, you go with that?
Yeah. Well, go for it. I mean, he's convincing you. He's not trying to convince me. I mean,
I know.
unless he wants to try to convince me too, but let's just stick
Sure.
with
that. It's okay. Anyway, I'm gonna try and remember some of these points. I'm doing this off the top of my head, so if I miss something, please inform me that I missed a argument or two. But anyway, so the first thing that we hit on was the idea of certainty. And you don't necessarily need to be certain of something, and that's perfectly fine. And I would agree with that. You don't need to hit this certainty thing that's like this mystical thing that objectively without any question. Absolutely not. You don't need to do that. That's not where I'm coming from. It's about breaking a certain threshold of confidence. You see, whenever I ask somebody to explain to me in a way that is supposed to be convincing that God definitely does exist, they ask these very profound questions. And these questions, it's clear that when they answer these very profound questions, they are certain in their answer. But they have not broken my certain threshold of confidence in their answer. We can ask why all day, every day, but we can also be honest in saying that we might not have the answer. Why is there something rather than nothing? We may not have the answer to that. And guess what? That is an intellectually honest position to have. normally what I see is that there's this strawman built where the atheist throws up his hands and they say, well, it's just a brute fact. It's just a brute fact. Well, I'm not saying it's a brute fact. Just a fact will be enough. As to why that fact exists is a totally separate question that has a totally separate answer that we may or may not have access to. And being intellectually honest about that is not a slight against me or you or anyone else for that matter. If you have faith, that's fine, but it has not reached that certain threshold where I'm going to have as much confidence in that particular answer as you. I actually have more confidence in the answer of we may not have an answer at all, because in that particular realm in which God occupies, we have a sample size of 0. And that's where we get to the other thing you said, which is we're seeking explanations. Well, yes, we are seeking explanations, but sometimes the journey is the fun part, not necessarily the destination. You know, we are currently in the process of trying to make sense of the universe around us. And there are a lot of unanswered questions. And that's perfectly fine to admit that they are simply unanswered. We are doing our best to answer them. And, you know, the whole idea of discovery, like, for example, with the James Webb Space Telescope, I mean, we paid $10 billion for the privilege. And I think the idea of, you know, exploring the universe to at least attempt to find these answers is where the real fun is. I actually don't lose any sleep at night knowing for a fact that we don't have all the answers regarding the universe and its ultimate destiny. And finally, we brought up communication. If I remember correctly, this was the last point. Communication via language is a human construct. That's it. It's no different than money or government. And the reason why certain words mean certain things is because we have agreed that they mean these certain things. The way that we learn language as toddlers is that we attribute certain words to certain actions or objects. And then as time goes on, we become very familiar, and then it becomes second nature to us. But that doesn't change the fact that it was a human construct to begin with, much like the words that write the Holy Bible. So if we are going to look at communication as some form of evidence that God does exist, or the intelligibility of God, it should also be noted that this type of human construct comes out in many other forms. Like I said before, money and government, it's no different. So I would be hesitant to attribute that to a God in any way, shape, or form. So that particular answer does not satisfy, I'm sorry to say.
The 18th century Scottish philosopher Thomas Reid said we have natural signposts for which to indicate things, that our language and our gestures aren't simply irrational or non-rational, but they point or goal-directed towards something. So they're not just agreement. They point towards something. They're natural. And Noam Chomsky makes this point also. There are some things in the human language that are rational, that we have natural signs that indicate why we do things. So some of your other points, I agree. It is a journey. That's why science came about. Many of the early scientists, like Newton and Galileo, these were theists, and they worked on the assumption that the world and the universe was discoverable, that it had laws that could be discovered. The thing is that they found and discovered those laws. So, the arguments that I'm presenting are the one about change and a few others that I'm going to get to tonight. These aren't logical demonstrations. A person can, fail to believe them, but they're metaphysical demonstrations. They involve change. So we need to try to explain that. How does change happen? Parmenides, the pre-Socratic philosopher, said change was impossible. Heraclitus said, permanence is illusory. All there is change. The Aristotelian position is that change must be accounted for by going from potential to actual. And there must be something, a first mover, not in a temporal series, but in a hierarchical series that accounts for there being change in the first place. So many of these arguments that I've been presenting, like Aristotle's first cause argument that involves change, these are, according to Thomas Aquinas and others, demonstrations of the existence of God. So let me try to move on from there, because the point is that I'm trying to convince you to be a Christian. So we need an explanation that accounts for the world around us, not just these philosophical arguments about change and about parts and about what keeps them together. But we also must have an explanation that is both rational, that takes into account historical events in the past. So I think theism does that. It gives a rational explanation for the life and death of Jesus, also his empty tomb, the post-mortem appearances, the very origin of the Christian faith, and indeed how Western civilization was built by this belief that the world operated according to rational laws that could be discovered. So this faith in progress, this faith in our cognitive abilities to give us reliable information, is what drove civilization, what drove Western civilization. But it's also what gives us these arguments. So the explanation I'm giving, and I'll stop here, it's multifaceted. That the naturalist or the atheist or radical skeptic, what have you, he tries to give an explanation that simply reduces those things or simply dismisses them out of hand. The theist, the Christian theist, is trying to give arguments for these various phenomena, and I think that's worth something. Okay.
I'm not going to comment on what it's worth, because what it's worth is completely subjective to each individual, and they're more than welcome to put as much faith or as little faith into that value as possible, or as they want, I should say. But to go over some of these points real quick, we need to explain the reality that is around us. Why do we need to explain anything right here, this instant? It's like we're so eager to get to the bottom of things that we will go ahead and accept that which quite literally has a sample size of 0. God's first cause would have been, before, if we can even use that word, the Big Bang. But like I said, in that realm, before space and time itself even existed, we cannot peer that far back into the past to find out what exactly happened. That's why I said at the very beginning, we have a sample size of 0. And so we can then go even further than that and say, well, if God was needed to cause the universe to come into being, then what caused God? But then we have what I imagine William Lane Craig says. He goes, no, whatever begins to exist has a cause. God never began to exist because he always was. Well, why can't we attribute that attribute to the universe itself with whatever singularity was there, quote unquote, before the Big Bang? Whatever explanation we can attribute to God, it appears that we can contribute to literally anything else, not just the Christian God, but any other God that we want, or a multitude of gods if we want, or even the universe or the original universal singularity itself. So all of these explanations, I would argue, are just as valid as the God assertion. Not saying that that explanation is it has greater power than the God explanation, but the fact that it's literally on the same level means I shouldn't accept one over the other just yet. They're kind of equivalent in their explanatory power, in that both of them have a sample size of 0. 0 equals 0. That's basic arithmetic. Next, change must be accounted for. Well, it depends on what you mean by that, because change can be accounted for. So, for example, like the state of Florida changed a lot. And I can tell you the reasons, because we got our ass kicked by Hurricane Irma back in 2017. And then we got our ass kicked again by Hurricane Ian just recently. I can account for that change. I can show you the radar and the over 100-mile-an-hour wind speeds that really caused a significant amount of change that led to the misery of many without power and air conditioning, especially in the humid state like Florida. That change can be accounted for, so it really depends on what you mean. If we're talking about change in terms of the ultimate change, like what set the initial spark into motion for the entire universe, then that goes back to what I said previously, in which case, job done. Next, we need an explanation. The we is doing a lot of heavy lifting in that sentence. We need an explanation. An explanation would be nice, but I'm not going to say I need it currently. I don't need to know what's happening at the most fundamental levels of my being, where each individual atom is moving, or the protons and electrons and they're whizzing around and stuff like that. Oh, all that information would be great. I imagine it would be useless information, but it would be pretty cool to know. I don't need to know any of that. I will lose 0 sleep tonight knowing for a fact that I don't know jack about what happened at the very beginning of the universe before, again, if we can even use that word, the Big Bang. Next, the universe appears to operate by, standards, kind of like, basically the only reason we're able to build models is because the universe can be interpreted in the form of models in which we can make predictions. And normally the argument is that the mere fact that we can construct these models shows that there's intelligibility to the universe itself, and that needs to be that need to have come about in some way from an intelligent mind. But who's to say God set that model into motion? Who's to say that it needs to be designed in that way in the first place? We talked about the brute fact thing, and I don't really want to say that that's a superior explanation, but it is still an explanation, and one that I would argue is just as valid as the God hypothesis. So while it is true that, a lot of scientists in the past were theists, they still did great work, and their faith is totally them. If they can use their faith in which they can make accurate and reliable models that make it possible for us to launch Artemis 1 into orbit around the moon, then round of applause to them. But I'm going to say that does little, if anything, to bring me any closer to the Christian God.
Okay. Notice that you're talking about the brute fact, but in everyday life, you, Rhetoric, don't say or try to explain why you went to work or why you ate something according to a brute fact. You seek explanations, rational explanations. So if it's just a brute fact at the bottom of reality, at the very bottom, then how can you have a rational explanation down the chain? And by the way, I think you're making a mistake. I'm not arguing from a Kalam cosmological argument perspective what happened at the very beginning. I'm arguing for a cause right here and now. What is the reason? What is the explanation for why anything exists right here and now? Why do electrons or that make up something? What holds them together? What holds physical particular things together? It seems that you need a rational explanation in terms of intelligibility to answer that. So I think if we step back and we're honest, in my opinion, that if we're going to seek rational explanations here and now, we simply can't say that that the reason why anything at all exists is because it's a brute fact. That would negate any rationality, any intelligibility of cause and effect that you seek to put on something or to explain various phenomena by. Also, change. Notice that the Aristotelian argument was in demonstrable proof by Aquinas. The fact that there's any change going on right now, whether being for the reason why weather instruments work right here and now, whether for why you go to work, whether you were 30 minutes late for today. Whatever it is, if it involves change, there must be something that that is not affected by change, that can account for all that change. That is seeking explanations. So I think theism in that regard does explain those various things. It also explains, it leaves open the possibility that God could perform a miracle in the life of Jesus. Notice that the atheist or the radical skeptic must simply postulate that miracles do not happen a priori, but the theist is on a better or a higher epistemic ground and saying, oh, some acts may be explained naturalistically, but some things, such as the resurrection of Jesus or the feeding of the 5,000, those may be a miracle, in case the best explanation would be that God performed those miracles, or in the case of Jesus, God raised Jesus from the dead. So I think theism is a more humble position when we look at all of reality, because it can say some things happen naturally and some things happen by the will of God. So, I think I'll end there.
All right. Just to kind of hinge on the brute fact thing, it is actually possible to explain things with just a brute fact. So, for example, brute fact of why I ate, I was hungry. Why Taco Bell? Because I'm poor and I like tacos and I had a craving for a colon cleanser.
That's an explanation.
Yeah, it's an explanation, and it's an explanation via a brute fact. It's a brute fact. I was hungry. I didn't choose to be hungry, but I'm choosing to not be hungry by eating Taco Bell. I'm also choosing to not be poor by spending as little money as possible on it. Also, a brute fact about why I was late, because it is just a brute fact that there was some jackass in a VW that thought it was a good idea to do 50 in the hammer lane and to probably move the hell over.
But is that really a brute fact, or is that the reason why I was late is because there was traffic, or the reason that I went to a certain place to eat is because I was hungry? That seems to be an explanation and not a brute fact.
No, the brute fact of why I ate, and then you can explain the brute fact. So, and this actually leads to the second part, which is it is a brute fact that it was reported that Jesus rose from the dead. It is also reported that Jesus fed an entire, crowd of people with 5 loaves and 2 fish. The numbers don't make sense. So clearly a miracle happened. So these things are reported. I am not denying that these things were reported. Just like I am not denying that it was reported that Brian Banks viciously raped his significant other. It was reported. And he went to jail for 9 years for this rape, only to be exonerated. Awkward. So basically what I'm trying to say is we can have this brute fact that Jesus was reported to do a lot of things, but mere reports or the hearsay of the Bible does not in any way, shape, or form convince me that Jesus actually did these miracles. In fact, if I remember correctly, in Romans 3, verse 4, it says, "Let God's word be true, but every man a liar, as it is written." And so basically, there seems to be a pre-built mechanism to say, hey, listen, we want you to take this book as definitive fact, no matter what anyone else says, even if what they say possibly, we don't know yet, but possibly could be a better explanation. If you have a pre-built filter in there to literally filter out any challenge to the so-called word of God, there seems to be a lack of confidence there that also brings me pause as to why that would even need to be in there to begin with if God really is such a clear, that the God hypothesis is such a clear explainer for all of these questions that plague humanity, not just today, but throughout the ages.
Wait a second, Red. The pre-built, did you say pre-built filter?
Yeah.
Okay.
I did.
Doesn't naturalism have a filter that explains away all the historical evidence for the miracles reported in the Bible?
I would say no, at least not in my position. What I'm saying is that another explanation exists. That's not to explain it away. That's not to say that one explanation is superior to the other. That would be explaining something away if I were actually to go down that road. What I'm saying is the same exact way it was reported that Brian Banks viciously raped his significant other, it was also reported that Joe Biden won the presidency, or that Elon Musk makes electric cars. Now, we can say that all of these things are reported, but some things are true and some things are not. And it was reported that Jesus rose from the dead. It was reported that Jesus fed an entire crowd of people with 5 loaves and 2 fish, turned water into wine, walked on water, and all this, mind freak shit that he was able to do.
It's not merely reported. It's reported on good reason and good evidence.
Yeah, just like it was reported on good reason, good evidence that Brian Banks viciously raped his significant other. They went to court over it.
I don't know what you mean by that. I'm not following. So
then let me go ahead and explain. We're talking about a court of law. We're talking about court of law, documents, evidence, testimony. We're talking about hitting a certain threshold, a certain standard before judgment is being placed on someone's innocence or guilt. There was a lot of weight thrown into this trial, just like there is a lot of weight thrown into the words of the Bible. You can have a lot of force behind it, but that thing can still be false. A lot of things have been said, a lot of things have been reported that turn out to be complete nonsense, no matter how much people want to believe those things to be true.
Would you ever believe that God raised Jesus from the dead on the basis of the historical evidence, or would you be predispositioned to discount the evidence for the resurrection because of your philosophical starting point of naturalism?
I don't know what you mean about that being a starting point. I would just say that the mere fact it was reported is all well and good, but I take that with a grain of salt and a lot of skepticism, because I can look at, for example, like Alexander the Great. I don't have as much of a disdain for that historical account of things as I do for the Jesus resurrection account of things. And maybe disdain is the wrong word for it, but I'm just going to go with it anyway. The reason is because we have throughout history, including today, people being kind of shit conquerors and stuff like that. Like, for example, Kim Jong-un is trying to be, the head of everything. And you had Vladimir Putin that's trying to inflict his influence on everyone. Clearly, this type of action, this type of warfying or whatever we're going to call it, has happened before in the past. So that reported account is more believable than that for which I have no example of it ever happening since, which was the resurrection of Jesus. It's only happened to one person, one time, and it's never happened again after that. Well, that leads me to believe that maybe this was either a one-off or it's just not true.
Well, you keep bringing up models, and that's all good and well, and thankfully for the discoveries of science, thankfully. But there's also history, historical studies, geology, or forensic science that deals with the unrepeatable. Historical events by their very nature are unrepeatable singular events. If God, as I argued by the Aristotelian proof, keeps the world in existence here and now and for all eternity, God might only perform a miracle every now and then, seldomly, but that doesn't discount that miracle. It seems to me that we need a worldview that is going to look at the evidence for the empty tomb, the post-resurrection appearances, the origin of the Christian faith, and here's a fourth one, that Western civilization itself has been built on this faith in the progress of progress of science, progress in so many ways, built on this faith. So it seems to me that intellectually humble theism will provide, is open to an explanation of the supernatural, where naturalism seems to tries to explain it away.
Well, we don't want to simply say that, oh, the miracle is not, how do I say, good enough or something like that. I'm going to just phrase it in that way. What I'm saying is that is an extraordinary claim. Now, when it comes to Alexander the Great conquering, when it comes to the rise and fall of Nazi Germany and stuff like that, when it comes to all of these other historical events, they are within the realm of possibility that we have examples of humanity doing some pretty crappy things just like that in the past. We have clear, distinct examples of that happening to this day. They are happening. But we only have the resurrection, the walking on water, the water and wine thing only happening one time. And you said, well, God might just be holding out on us. Well, then I'm just going to ask the obvious question here. Why is he doing that? If he really wanted to, I mean, let's just, get to the steak and potatoes. If God went onto Fox News tomorrow, that would solve we would not even be having this conversation right now. He'd be like, look, I'm on Fox News. I'm talking to Tucker Carlson. I'm going to turn water into wine right here on national television. Look at that. It's amazing. Oh, it's floating now. It's floating. You see that?
I've asked many atheists before in debates, what would they believe in God if God put on the moon or on some asteroids? Just believe in me. Or if God performed a miracle right in front of them. And I said, wouldn't, under your philosophy, you would simply explain it away? You would think that you're deceiving yourself, or maybe took some drug that's coloring your senses. So I think a person will make decisions, will make explanations or seek explanations in accordance with their worldview. That's why I think theism is in a better place in this regard when it comes to the miracles.
Well, and I don't believe. I would say this. Sorry to interrupt you, but I would say I wouldn't immediately accept it, but I would not immediately reject it. The idea is that when something profound like that happens, it warrants investigation. We are going to investigate like, for example, let's say we had a giant asteroid that was coming by Earth, and then on the side of this asteroid, it said, God is real, I'm here, I'm watching you, and blah, 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 or whatever message is written on the side of this asteroid. That would be pretty amazing, but of course, we would then ask ourselves, okay, is there any non-supernatural explanation for what we're seeing here? Now, in that possibility, I would find that very hard to believe that there would be a natural explanation, unless Dr. Evil made a space laser and decided to have some fun with graffiti. But barring that being a possibility, which I don't think it would be, then yeah, God would be the superior explanation in that particular regard. But we're not seeing stuff like that.
Well, we do see the very origin of the universe. And it's not that I argued for the origin of the universe today. I did not. But I do hold that the Kalam cosmological argument is a real signpost pointing to God. And so is, as I argue today, the Aristotelian proof accounting for why there's any change at all in the world, why there are any finite things in the world, that there must be an absolute necessary thing that holds together all physical things here and now as the best explanation. So I think that there's reasons that we have all around us to believe that God does exist. But to get back to Jesus's miracles, notably the resurrection of his resurrection from the dead, it didn't come out of nowhere. It came out of the end, the climax, out of his own paralleled life of holiness, of teaching, of proclaiming the kingdom of God and the penalties of sin, being intellectually honest, performing other miracles. Other people saw him. Other people tried to, or were skeptical, such as Thomas, such as Paul, such as even some of Jesus's immediate family. The Jewish authorities had Paul to persecute Christians also. This is very early in the church. So I don't think it has no evidence. I think it's on solid historical ground, and we need a worldview that can decide whether the purported or reported claims of a resurrection actually happened or not.
Go ahead.
Okay, yeah, we're at 40 minutes, so let me just kind of jump in here real quick, because I know you guys didn't want to go too long, but I got some questions and I got some feedback real quick. Okay?
Yeah.
So, let me do the super chats first. First, obviously, Kimomaki for $2 Canadian. No question, just trying out my new debit card. Thank you. It works. It works successfully. I appreciate it. Enotes00 for $20. Joshua, do you still find fantasizing about living in the past and owning slaves? Not sure what that was referring to, but it's obviously from a prior discussion, but feel free to answer it.
No. No, I think he's taken something that I said once out of context.
There's a lot of context there. That's for sure, if that's the case. Another question is, why be a Christian as opposed to an adherent of an ideology like humanism? Humanism has far less assumptions and has outcomes that benefit society. And that's by Udahef.
Is that for me?
Yeah, it's directed to you.
Okay. Well, if God does not exist, there is no ultimate meaning and significance to being a humanist. If you do believe in God and you think you can rationally justify that belief, as I believe I can, which I try to give these various arguments, then it opens up the world anew, afresh, to do science, which Reds does, but to also do art, paint. There are all kinds of different vocations that God has given us gifts for, and it just makes the world alive.
All right, so let me ask. Okay, so I just want to make sure you don't want to own slaves, right?
No.
Okay, because slavery is bad. All right, so a couple of points that I've noticed so far. Rez, I'm gonna go after you first. Okay, so be prepared. I think you had a little bit of issue with the word brute. The brute fact that you were describing is not how Josh is using brute fact, nor would anybody in philosophy use it that way. Brute fact is understood as something that doesn't have an explanation. It doesn't have any fundamental reason, cause, or anything that explains the phenomenon. So by saying it's a brute fact I'm hungry, it isn't a brute fact, because that is explainable by, the fact that your biological needs, you have, your biological metabolic pathways. You can reduce it as much as you want. Why did I eat something? I was hungry. Why was I hungry? Because my body was telling me through chemical processes that I was hungry. Well, why do you do that? I mean, the brute fact would be at some point in the regression there's no explanation. Now there are ways around that, which goes to Joshua. I'm sure you've heard of infinitism. And infinitism would be the belief that you have regression all the way to infinity of justifications, and there's just an endless things of just justificatory things off from one justificatory. It never ends. As opposed to brute fact, which does end, but doesn't actually explain anything. So I hate to say by definition, but by the understanding of brute fact, there is no explanation. So there are different other things that you can have that are possible, such as a brute fact or infinitism.
Well, when I say brute fact, what I was trying to say is that I'm going to stop where it's relevant to me.
Yeah,
So if
that's
you ask
fine.
me,
Right.
what did I eat? Well, for me, it's a brute fact because I'm hungry, and the reason why I call it brute fact is because that's as much of a explainer as I
wouldn't
need
use brute.
to go
Just
to
say
Taco Bell and
fact.
get something to eat.
It doesn't even be brute because brute literally means there is no explanation. You're giving an explanation, saying it's a brute fact is a contradiction.
When you try to look at the causal chain and pick out a link, where Red's Rhetoric picks out a link and says, well, that's good enough. But if the whole causal chain is without reason, then how can he pick out a link down the chain that somehow has a reason or somehow rational?
It depends on what you're asking for the causation, right? You talk about Aristotelian. There's Aristotelian 4 causes, right? And so what causes you're asking for? The efficiency, the agent, the moving cause. And so when somebody says, hey, if I threw a ball to you, Josh, and somebody asks, why did the ball get thrown to you? One explanation is Steve threw the ball. Another one is the physics. These are all different explanations depending on what type of question you're asking.
And then there's the final cause and the reason why causation exists in the first place, or why anything at all exists. That's what I'm trying to articulate.
Right, and that goes back to what Red says initially. So Red's opened up, and Red's told you he really does basically have any interest in the Bible or philosophy, things of that nature. He just typically doesn't, right? And you come in as an apologist to convince him that Jesus is true. You just jumped into Greek philosophy, talking about Parmenides and Heracles, and how one promoted change, one didn't. Is Heracles?
Heraclinus.
Okay. Heraclinus. But one promoted that there was some kind of change. One promoted that the universe didn't have change. That it was constant. But those were, how many hundreds of years BC was that? I'm guessing 400 or 500 BC.
That was about 5 BC, 500 BC, 400 BC, about that. But what I'm trying to say,
I want to make a point. So that's not going to convince Reds. If you want to convince Reds Christianity is true, going back to 500 BC is not going to be a way to do it. And so one thing that Reds said that really struck home to me is because I feel the exact same way as Reds. He said, basically, look, if God wants him to be a Christian, then why is it everybody he talks to doesn't explain it to him in a way that he would understand? And I'm not seeing you explain it in a way he understands. So I want you to just take like 5 minutes. Forget the philosophy, forget the Greek, forget the causal relationships, the Aristotelian, the Thomistic, the first cause, the prime mover, anything like that, because it's not going to convince a non-believer. Those things by Thomas Aquinas didn't convince the non-believer. They were basically to keep the believer believing. They were
I don't know if I agree with any of that.
Well, you don't have to. That's open to interpretation.
The reason why the non-believer is not convinced is because Aristotle has been abandoned. Efficient and final causes have been abandoned.
I'm a non-believer, and I literally based my paper on Aristotelian logic. My last paper. Okay, so I did the square of opposition, which was semiotic square, but it's based on the square of opposition. So Aristotelian.
It's all about, Steve, if I can just speak for myself here, it's all about efficiency with me. Now, when I talk about philosophical concepts and stuff like that, the individuals that may have been the first to come up with certain philosophical concepts, their names are irrelevant to me rather than the concepts themselves. And then I ask myself the questions. Does the concept, if I were to apply it to my life, get me any closer to figuring out an answer to whatever question is posed in front of me? The philosophical concepts and the explanations that you have given me, just saying a fact here, have not gotten me any closer to God, just in general, and especially the God of the Christian Bible. Well, these explanations have fallen short of that.
The one thing I said at the beginning was, as a classical apologist, you try to give arguments for the existence of God. I had others, I did not use them, but I try to argue for the existence of God, and it makes it more probable that God raised Jesus from the dead. We went over that some, but I'm arguing from the totality of the evidence, not just choosing one and here and now, but looking at all of the evidence, doing my best to present.
No, and I appreciate you presenting that, but where the disagreement is that you place one at a higher value than the other in terms of these multitude of explanations. What I said, and I believe I was very clear when I said this. If not, I apologize and I'll repeat. I'm not saying that one explanation is any worse than the other. I'm saying is that I have no reason to elevate one over the other, making it the obvious choice. So if you say, oh, well, all these explanations and stuff like that, if we look at all of them, then clearly God is the superior explanation. Well, unfortunately, the only thing I've been given is just an assertion that it is the best explanation, with no explanation as to why that particular explanation is better than anything else I can come up with.
Well, remember, I gave the intelligibility of the universe, there are certain presuppositions that we need to incorporate for science to even be possible. One of those is final causation. And that if the discussion would have went longer or would have went in more detail or went in other directions, I don't know. I would have went more into that, but I'm trying my best to present an overall case. I just think when you present arguments for God, it does make the claims of Jesus and the resurrection not as improbable, taken at face value, as it would be without giving a case for natural theology first.
But why would that theology be needed in order for science to work?
Well, if you abandon Aristotle, you're gonna believe in causes that could produce anything. They would be based on constant conjunction, mere things of our mental construct, rather than in the real essence of things. David Hume, when he disavowed causation, when he disavowed final causes, said anything could be the cause of anything. So if we would have discussed causation more, I would have went over a match, how it always produces heat, a fire,
anything could cause anything, but then that is why we have the process of elimination to kind of whittle down the list. And also, it's not the case.
There's an infinity. A near infinite amount of things which we could point to being the cause of something else, unless we have a native.
We can just as easily reject an infinite number of things that we know for a fact it isn't. So, for example, a match is going to, if I strike a match, it's going to go on fire. I can immediately reject an infinite number of things. I'll put one as an error, magical unicorn farts. I can just reject that right out. And I can come up with an infinite number of things that clearly aren't the explanation. But that doesn't mean that I can't.
I would, if you would have said that, I would have given the Thomistic proof between the essence of a thing and the existence of a thing. And if I gave you 3 examples of things that maybe a dinosaur, maybe a baseball player, and maybe a unicorn, you could not know if they exist or not by pure reason, just based on their existence. If I showed that to a kid or something.
The idea is about being convinced. You're right. I do not know whether or not dinosaurs really truly existed, or if a unicorn really truly doesn't exist and stuff like that. But the idea is the same. It's about what has been presented to me in regards to these subjects or these entities or these animals, these life forms, I guess we'll call them, and is what has been presented to me enough to convince me? When it comes to the dinosaurs, yes, they've been able to present enough to me that I'm now confident in accepting that answer. See where
what I'm trying to delineate in the Thomistic proof is that their essence and their existence must be conjoined, like brought together.
Well, when you say essence, what do you mean by that?
That something that something is something essentially. It's according to its nature. Like I couldn't fly. It's not without some apparatus or a mechanical device. It's not within the nature of being an animal, or I'm sorry, a human to fly.
It seems like we're kind of mixing that in with the original, but referring to it by a different word. And I'm just trying to say, when you say essence, it needs to be conjoined with, first of all,
with its existence.
Yeah.
What I'm trying to say is we couldn't know before we looked at the evidence that a unicorn existed or not existed just based on its essence. We would have to look at the totality of the evidence. But because everything of our experience has an essence and an existence also, it doesn't have to exist, but it could exist in the imagination. So what makes it exist? There must be something that's essence just is its existence, and that would be God.
Okay, Jamie, thanks for you had a little super sticker of a unicorn for $1.49. Thank you.
Look at that. Unicorns do exist, and they come for $1.99.
Yeah, and whether or not unicorns, can be rationally determined a priori, of course not. I say posteriori. It had to be through observation, but that's not a big deal. But let me ask both you guys a question. I want to get your guys' explanation. Assume biblical times. Assume bodies came out of the earth, and there was, people being resurrected, or they were coming out of their graves. We know that they have earthquakes in those areas. We know that graves are usually kind of shallow. We know that earthquakes can expose graves. What is more likely, based upon experience of that explanation, that the bodies came out of the graves because God made it happen by supernatural causation or by an earthquake? Reds, what is a more parsimonious explanation or abductive argument do you think would be the case?
I'm going to go with earthquake.
Okay. Doesn't surprise me. Jamie Russell for another super chat for Smiley Sun.
Can I respond to that?
Oh yeah, no, I just got to get the super chats out of the way. Because I'm broke. No, I'm not broke. I'm just kidding. But I'd like to make some money on this channel eventually. Would be kind of nice. So every dollar helps. I appreciate it, guys. Any super chat, any membership, any kind of super chat, I appreciate it all very much. So,
is it okay if I respond to that?
Yeah, it's for both of you. Go ahead.
Okay. Well, I think you're mentioning something in Matthew 27. Is that what you're alluding to?
It's Matthew. I don't know the chapter and verse because I don't.
Matthew 27.
I do think it's Matthew though.
Some scholars, some historians like Mike Licona think it's apocalyptic literature, allegorical literature. That. I'm not sure.
Which means it didn't happen.
Well, was that the intent of the author?
But that would mean literally it didn't happen if it's apocalyptic literature. It's fiction.
Allegorical.
Or even allegorical. It would be.
Yeah, but that wasn't the intent of the author. He's trying to do something else there. And scholars aren't.
What would be the explanation? If just as described, what do you think would be the most likely explanation?
We'd have to look at the historical evidence.
The historical evidence is there was bodies coming out of the ground, and we know there's earthquakes there. What do you think is more likely an explanation, just given that data?
You'd have to look at the totality of the historical evidence. Now, look.
What else would be needed?
Well, who is being resurrected? If it's Jesus of Nazareth, then at the upside of his own claims of divinity, his own predictions about rising from the dead, I would say that puts a wrench in your explanation.
I don't see at all how that's anything to do with what I ask. Because if we're talking about best explanations, because by the way, that's how you should have gone, I think, to Reg. Say, hey, Reg, this is the best explanation. Let me kind of tell you why, without going into the philosophical aspects of it, because you're just going to be talking past him. If you want to convert somebody like Reg, philosophy is not the way to do it. I can tell you right now. It's just not the vehicle for it. But
I didn't know. He didn't.
God didn't tell you this.
I didn't know he wasn't philophically inclined, and I don't mean that in a way.
Yeah, I don't either. It's Reds. He does rockets. I mean, believe it or not. Yeah.
Here's my philosophy or my philosophical understanding. I made the claim on my channel a few times, and I'll repeat here that philosophy, I have it down like really, really well. But a lot of people misunderstand me when I say that. And so I'm going to go ahead and just clear that up right now. The reason why I claim to have philosophy really, really well is because I have gotten rid of all the baggage. You're right. I do not know all the famous people that came up with these philosophical concepts. I don't even know the title that these philosophical concepts go through. But I follow one big philosophical principle. If you cannot explain it simply, I'm sorry, you don't understand it. And you'll be talking past people when you do try to explain it in that way.
But do you think that could be more due to the psychological predisposition towards naturalism?
It's about making sure that we're clear in our speech. It's about being prudent. So if I wanted to talk to somebody, I'm going to say, hey, listen, if you are looking at a Dodge Charger and it drives away from you, it's going to appear to get smaller as it gets further away. That you understood. But if I told you that alpha equals 2 times the arctan of g over 2r, where alpha is the angular size of the object, g is the actual size of the object, and r is the distance to the object, you would be like, what the hell did you just say?
No,
I did. I did ask why there was intelligibility to the universe. I should have said, why is there intelligibility or a law-like structure to the universe rather than nothing?
And that is a very good question. And here's the thing. I do not claim to know the answer, but what I will say is that the answer you have given me does not satisfy. The reason it does not satisfy is because I'm getting a taste, a hint, an inkling of special pleading for God when any other deity or any other like, for example, power source, like, for example, the original singularity, could be the explanation itself just as much, if not more so.
God, yeah, okay.
I mean, if you look at it this way, we've only seen naturalistic explanation. Okay, let me rephrase that. Reds has only seen naturalistic explanations. I don't think he's ever said he's seen a supernatural event.
That's why I said in that particular realm where God would operate, and this is why when I said he set the initial spark into motion, when I brought that up, in that realm, we have a sample size of 0. We are pulling this explanation from nothing.
That wasn't my argument, though. That you're.
But I actually disagree. The reason now, far be it from me to tell you what your argument is. I understand. I'm not trying to be rude here, but it all comes back to that thing you said earlier, which is, it's a brute fact of why you're hungry, and you can just keep going back and back and back and back and back. Well, eventually there's got to hit a roadblock. The first domino needs to be tipped over at some point, and the claim always is that God is the best explanation for how that first domino was tipped over, rather than the idea that maybe that the part of the table that the domino was on at the very beginning was a little off balance.
Well, see, you're arguing, and I pointed this out from a linear perspective of the Kalam cosmological argument. Now I happen to think that it probably is a plausible argument, but I'm arguing from something more fundamental, and more fundamental than even science.
Which is
change. What accounts for any change here and now? What accounts for it? What accounts for the law-like structure of the universe? What accounts for the atoms of the universe? What holds these things together here and now?
You're talking about fundamentals. So basically, to make sure I'm not misunderstanding you, there is a bottle of water sitting upright on my table. Now it's on its side. There's water gushing all over my keyboard. That was probably a very bad idea. But why did that happen? I can account for that change. Can I not? I'm the reason that situation changed. Probably for the worse, right?
You accounted for it proximately, but what accounted for all the change that's going on in the room you're in right now?
Exactly.
The warmth of the temperature, the subatomic particles. Why are they functioning in a way that can be understood in an intelligible way by you?
And all the way back to the beginning, right? You can follow that chain of causal events all the way back to the beginning, right? Basically, all the way to the Big Bang, where God would be the one to put that initial spark in motion.
I'm not arguing from a linear perspective. I'm arguing from here and now. Look, the universe could be eternal for all this argument considers.
That is true.
It's only arguing for the causes here and now. What accounts for these potentials? There must be something that is greater, that has the potential to cause any of these causes that are going on. And but
wasn't I that? So, like, for example, I now have a bottle of Coca-Cola on my desk, and I do this. Now there's water and Coca-Cola mixed on my keyboard, and that is probably really bad for the electronics of it, but I can account for that change in the here and now. If that's the only thing that's important, that's all the explanation that's really needed, correct?
That's the local explanation. What accounts for the existence here and now of the town that you're living in, or the city you're living in?
He's just asking, all he's trying to do is say, hey, what is the metaphysical explanation for everything? He's going back to the very foundation, whether there is or isn't an explanation. He's subscribing to what's called the principle of sufficient reason, which I don't subscribe to. So he thinks that everything has to have an explanation. I don't think that way. I do think brute facts do exist, but
I take.
But we all live that way.
But I don't live that way. Like I said, my way of living is by pragmatism. And so I don't feel it is pragmatic to go into the weeds as to why two different fluids decide to spill over my keyboard when in relation to the temperature of the room, the city that I'm in, or in what position the Earth is in its rotation around the sun. So if I have, like, for example, a bottle of orange juice that I just picked up from 7-Eleven, and I do this, now there's 3 different fluids onto my keyboard, and I'm going to need a new keyboard.
We're gonna have a fundraiser for Rhetoric.
Do you ever seek rational explanations?
There's probably not a rational explanation for why I spilled 3 different fluids on my keyboard. But I'm going to go with the fact that I was trying to make a point, and probably could have done so without sacrificing my keyboard.
So Josh, hang on real quick. Okay, so if everything has a rational explanation,
but that's what I'm trying to say, that we live according to these principles.
So let me just pull something out of my. Okay, so let's just say, like, the actual tilt. The actual tilt is what, 23 and a half degrees. It's 23 and a half degrees, right? So why did God make the actual tilt of the Earth 23 and a half degrees? Why did he do that? What's the explanation of why the Earth is at 23.5 degrees? Why God wanted that to be the case?
Because I don't know why that means that there is no explanation.
Exactly. That because we can't ask God, we have no idea what any metaphysical explanation or fundamental explanation would be. So God, hang on, let me finish.
But we're not going to say it's irrational.
I didn't say there's also irrational. But because positing a God doesn't tell us anything, positing a God doesn't explain any of these questions.
It says that the universe is intelligible in the first place. If the reason is it's based on a rational order.
I say that the reason why the universe is, and here's my counter to that, is that if the universe wasn't, then the universe itself would be a contradictory entity. Contradictory entities are not going to exist. You can't have a square circle, that kind of thing. So that is why you have scientists able to make models of the universe to the point where they can make accurate and precise predictions. Like, for example, orbital mechanics. We know We can figure out the next solar eclipse years, decades, centuries in advance because we have the ability to make these models. And the reason why is because the universe itself is not a contradictory entity.
Yeah, you're right. The universe is unbelievable. It's built on a mathematization format in that,
I don't see how a contradictory entity in any aspect would exist. I would say by the mere fact that the universe is not contradictory, that to me is a sufficient reason to say why it is that way in the first place, because it could not be any other way.
Mm-hmm.
That's a good point. The universe cannot, be contiguous.
Well,
have
frankly,
apparent contradictions, but no true contradictions.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess I just don't see that. I don't see how we can discover and we can apprehend the wonderful findings of science in the universe, the law-like structure therein.
If it was
seems
really
to me that it's also rational to seek an explanation. What is the best explanation of that law-like structure that governs the universe?
But God has never been held as the best explanation because we have naturalistic explanations for naturalistic phenomena. That's what science does. That's why science doesn't posit God.
Thomas Aquinas saw God as the best explanation of the universe.
How long ago was Thomas Aquinas? What century did he live?
So
does Google have that answer?
Oh, I don't.
So
know.
now you're
yeah, of course it does, but I'm not sitting.
Wait, hold on. Are you saying because
I think it was 13th? I'm going to say 13th, 14th century. I think it was 13th century.
Because of the age of what Thomas held, it must be false.
No, but I mean, we've come a long way in 1,000 years. If he lived in the 12th or 13th century, whatever the hell it was, that's almost that's 1,000 years. So the fact you have to go back to Thomas Aquinas to try to argue Red should be a Christian is pretty remarkable, to say the least. I mean, I think Thomas Aquinas was a genius. Don't get me wrong. Hang on, Thomas Aquinas is probably one of the best philosophers of his time, bar none. I mean, he was a genius for his time. But all his arguments 1,000 years later, Paul just shouldn't be running them. They're not good arguments because they were only there to show reason why people believe, but they believe. But we have much better explanations of things now than we did 1,000 years ago. So maybe 1,000 years ago, it might have been rational to say God might have been a better explanation because they didn't have the information we have now. We know when we see something, we don't automatically attribute it to supernatural causation because it's never, ever in our experience, mine personally, or Red's, if I can speak for him, has never been a case where we've seen something happen and attributed to a supernatural causation in my adult life. In my teens, yes, but not my adult life.
Simply because we ourselves haven't witnessed something miraculous or supernatural happen.
I'm willing to.
Is that really a good reason to discount? No, well, then we would discount all of history because we're treating history as built on models.
But not if the history is looked at through a naturalistic viewpoint. When we see magic,
what about the specific evidence for the resurrection of Jesus? Maybe looking at it through a naturalistic perspective isn't the best model to do history.
To be clear, I didn't outright reject it, and not just the resurrection part, but also just the God hypothesis in general. I didn't actively reject it. A lot of people have assumed that that's what I've done in the past. Not you, but in previous debates I've had, they assume that I just outright reject God, or I reject Jesus, or the resurrection, or the miracles that Jesus supposedly performed. I don't reject it. But the thing is that at the exact same time that I don't reject it, I also say that I don't accept it. I can say both things and not have a contradictory frame of view.
True.
Well, that I think we should have humility, and here's something that I have humility on. I don't know with 100% certainty that Christianity is true. I can't demonstrate Christianity is true with 100% certainty, but we can't demonstrate anything from history with 100% certainty. It's only built on plausibility and probability.
Correct. It's all about whether or not it has hit that personal threshold. That is what I've been trying to say the entire time, is that when it comes to...
Well, it's also what I've been trying to say too.
Well, when it comes to the God hypothesis, for me, it just hasn't hit that threshold yet. That's it.
Okay. Thank you for saying that.
Yeah, and it did at one time for me, but then as I learned more about stuff and realized I was not justified to hold the belief that I did, I changed my position. I'm no longer a theist.
History time.
Reds was no longer a theist. Right?
We spoke about history before. Allow me to give everyone a history lesson. The first time I actually ever spoke to Steve McRae, I was a Christian, and the way that I was, I guess, turned onto a different path is that Steve McRae absolutely annihilated the living fuck out of me in a debate. It was a bloodbath. He was not kind.
With love.
Not gentle.
With love.
He was not kind. He was not gentle. There was no lube at all. And when it finally came down to it, he basically asked me some very profound questions, and I had to. And basically, I had a choice. I can be intellectually honest with myself, or I can lie to myself. I had to be intellectually honest with myself at that point in time to say, listen, I actually don't know. And it was Steve McRae was actually the first person I spoke to that said, if you don't know, that's okay. And I was like, oh, it is? Well, shit, that makes life pretty easy.
It's so funny, too, because so many theists have convinced atheists that you have to know something in order to justify belief. I had that discussion literally yesterday where somebody was saying, well, how could you, if something is not knowable, if God isn't knowable, how can you justify belief in God or believe that God doesn't exist? I'm like, what does knowability have to do with believing God exists or not? Because knowledge is a subset of belief. But theists have convinced atheists of this. It's really strange because the theists used to go around saying, if you don't know, you can't justify belief. Or if you can't prove God doesn't exist, you can't justify atheism. These were all vastly negatively rhetorical arguments that the atheists seem to have incorporated nowadays. And I don't know why.
I totally agree, and I say my beliefs are provincial. You know, I base it on the evidence. I've been studying this topic for quite some time, almost 25 years now, and
I appreciate that. And so here's my thing, and this is my final question for the evening. I think that we just scratched the surface of this conversation. I actually truly do, that we can actually go deeper into this conversation, but we're not going to be able to do it on the limited time we have. So my last question to you is, would you be willing to have a part 2 to this discussion? And would you be willing to have it go a lot longer than an hour?
Yes, I certainly would. And I really like talking to you because you're a very intellectual, a very intelligent person. I've conversed with some pretty big names out there, and I think you're right up there with the top of them. So absolutely. So yes.
Yeah, we're not here to crap on the believer. Obviously, I mean that's just not what this show's about.
No, I we're all respectful towards each other. So absolutely.
Yeah, I don't want to say that. Oh, you're wrong. Blah, 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 blah. It's no, there's going to be none of that. So, Steve, if you can do us a solid and
I'll make it happen.
Go ahead and schedule that.
So we're kind of we'll bring this to the close, but don't leave yet, guys, because I have one last thing for you. So we're kind of bringing it to a close because I obviously he didn't convert to Christianity, and I don't think anybody really had an expectation to. But I wanted to see where Joshua was coming from. I figured it'd be from a very heavy philosophical point of view, which is to me again. If God wants to convert Reds or convert me, God's going to put the person to explain it to us in a way that is going to make sense to us. And I'm not saying Josh didn't. I mean, Josh's philosophy is pretty on point. I'm not saying he doesn't know philosophy, because he does. I mean, he does know his subject matter.
I'll say yes. I was of all the things that convinced, non-convinced, or whatever. I am 100% convinced, actually, that you do know your philosophy.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of people are saying word salad, word salad. It's not. No, it's just. I mean, he's trying to explain it to Reds in a way that Reds is understanding. But I mean, I know a little bit about this topic, and I can safely say that Josh, he does understand it. But again, but you have to be able to explain it in a way that is going to convert somebody, right? But anyways, we will have a part 2. Like I said, this is not to crap on believers or non-believers. I hold both parties equally to the same rules, the same feet to their fire. This is why I kind of got on Reds about the brute fact, because the brute fact is literally something that has no explanation. You can't say my explanation is a brute fact, because that would be strange. And I think Josh would agree upon that, right?
Yeah, but we discussed lots of stuff. So
awesome. Okay, so to leave us, Reds, Landon Kurt Knoll, a very dear friend of the both of us, wanted you to briefly tell the audience about your rocket experience. You don't have to go into great detail, and then where there's that video at, so they can see one of the greatest all-time filming of an Artemis 1 rocket of all time. I think that was the first one, wasn't it? The only one, wasn't it?
Yeah, that's Artemis 1. That was the first ever launch of the SLS rocket. It launched out of Cape Canaveral, Florida, and it was absolutely spectacular. It turned night into day. It was amazing.
It was absolutely amazing. Stuff on there,
so guys, if you were to go to my channel, Red's Rhetoric, it is the top video on my channel. It should be auto-playing on my channel, but it's the name of the video is Tracking Artemis 1. And what I was able to do was I was able to capture the booster separation in such exquisite detail that it beat NASA's own broadcast of the launch. When I was tracking the rocket, I tracked it in such a smooth way that it out-smoothed NASA. I beat NASA. I want to go to like the media department of NASA and go, hey guys, here's your L.
Yeah, I don't know why you just don't become a professional NASA photographer.
Listen,
call them up,
because of what you just said, Reds, I'm going to recommend that you work for Elon Musk and try to get us to Mars.
Or fix Twitter.
I'm gonna try. I have to get through his Twitter minions, but we'll see what happens. But to Landon, I do want to say this is that there's actually 2 videos of this launch on my channel. And 3 actually. But the first one is the live stream. The live stream was just that, broadcasted live, no edits, no cuts at all. So if anyone out there is a conspiracy theorist that think that they didn't actually launch this damn thing, that was live. You can't fake that. Second, the edited video is the same exact footage, but in beautiful, exquisite 4K resolution. I mean, it's just excellent. And then the third video is actually a streak lapse. It's when you trace the rocket trail as it goes into the sky. I uploaded that last night, and it is just gorgeous.
While you're working on rockets and all this, I'm trying to figure out the coffee maker that I have here at the house.
No, don't worry. They're practically the same thing. So,
also big shout out to Astronomy Live, and you also had help with the tracking software with.
Oh yeah. None of this would be possible without Astronomy Live and the tracking software. And speak of the devil, he's actually calling me right now. So, what I'm going to do is I'm going to jet. So, Steve, I'm going to say it's been a pleasure. It's always a pleasure to be on the Non-Sequitur Show, and I really hope we have this discussion again, because, quite frankly, I think we can go a little bit deeper into this conversation than I agree we have in this stream, because of the limited amount of time. So I believe your name was Josh. That's correct.
Josh. That's right.
All right. So Josh, it's been a pleasure. It's been real. It's been fun, and I hope we speak again very soon.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Josh, go ahead and let people know where they can find you. I do have your link also in the video description, as well as Red's, and then I'm going to leave the StreamYards and then do a final shout out and go from there.
Well, you can find me on Twitter. It's Christ is Risen 9 as the number 9. And on YouTube, it's The Christian Resistance. It's a very small YouTube channel, but hopefully I can keep working away.
Awesome, man. Well, we appreciate it. And, I love respectful dialogue with theists. We get on flat earthers, we get on young earth creationists, obviously, because that's more than just philosophy. That's science, and they're bastardizing science, and that's going to be a little bit different story for people that believe a specific belief, whether they're Christian, Muslim, Jewish, or whatever. It takes all types, and I think that religion has its place, just like anything else in society. I think there's good and bad with it. I do think humanism probably can take the place of it eventually one day, and religion probably will be phased out. I do think that, but you never know. Who knows? Like I said, God can come down anytime and say, "Hey, Steve, want to have lunch?" And I'll be like, "Yeah, you damn Skippy, let's do it." So you never know, right? But I like the fact that a theist like Josh, whether you agree with his philosophy or not, can come in, be civil, be polite, have a nice dialogue. That's what I like to see. That's what I like to hear. That's what I enjoy. It doesn't have to be contentious until you say the earth is flat. Then Rez is going to eviscerate you and leave a bloody pulp. It's just the way it is. Right, Josh?
Yeah, that's a crazy position.
I think we all agree on that. All right, I'm going to leave the stream yards. I'm going to wrap it up. I want to thank you, Josh, and I'll be in touch with you, okay?
All right, thanks.
All right, guys. Thanks a lot for watching. I appreciate it. Probably wasn't one of the longer episodes, but you know what? I think it's one of the more interesting ones because you get to see, an actual dialogue between two people, and see whether, somebody is going to be converted based upon argumentation. I don't think the argumentation obviously was significant enough to cause a conversion. I do believe that if people are going to convert to a particular religion, it's probably going to be for very, very, very detailed reasons. As a matter of fact, Capturing Christianity just recently, I think it was yesterday, converted from like a non-denominational Protestant or something like that to a Catholic, believe it or not. So I'm sure he has his reasons. I don't think it was some kind of divine experience that he had. I think he did it through reading and investigations on his own. I don't know how he arrived at that conclusion. I have no idea. Catholic would probably be one of the least religions I would ever become, just above Scientology. But the fact is that for myself, I would have to have some kind of probably religious experience in order to ever believe again. That's not asking for a sign. I know theists have said, "Oh, well, that's asking for a sign." No, it's not, actually. It's just a non-resistant non-believer that says, "Look, I'm inquisitive. I like to know if there's things out there that I'm not aware of that I can get information about. And if God wants them to be revealed to me, I'm down for that." But as I maintain now, I don't think God solves anything. I don't think God resolves anything. I don't think it explains anything. Because every time you posit God, it just asks more questions like, why did God do this? Why did God do that? Why did God make the laws of the universe the way they are? Why are the nomological laws exactly the way they are? You have an infinite amount of questions that just don't have answers to them. And I think we are so limited in our faculties and so epistemically limited due to biological factors, especially our fact that we can only comprehend so much, we may never know the answers. And that ambiguity and that inability to have answers is infuriating to most people. We like to have answers, but we have to recognize we may not have them. We may not ever get answers. And in life, we've realized that. And I don't think that the big metaphysical questions of the day have any compunction to tell us what the answers of these mysteries are. I don't think there's no onus of the universe. I think we recognize that there's certain things we just don't know, and we may never know. And unfortunately, that's life. With that, guys, I'm going to leave you guys to have your own view on what transpired here. And if you want to leave comments, by all means, I love reading comments. So leave a comment in the video description. Let me know what you think. I want to thank you all for watching and listening after the live stream. I want to thank my moderators. I want to thank the super chatters and the super stickers. You can donate through the channel also after it uploads through leaving a super comment. I think they call it something else, but I'm just going to call them super comment or something. I don't remember that. Super thanks. That's what they're called. Super thanks. I'd appreciate all of them. I do call out everybody who donates. So with that, guys, I will see you next week on my own channel. I'll be discussing some philosophy stuff. Not quite sure which. I've been talking to a few people that want to join and reaching out. I'm trying to have a discussion right now with somebody who really, really does understand the topic of logic, or the logic of the statement of agnostic atheism, right? That's kind of been my focus for the last week or so. Is I'm trying to write either another essay or paper on the logical ambiguity of agnostic atheism. I know I already did one, but I'm trying to make it a little more formalized. So if you have anybody or know anybody that likes to talk about that topic, have them reach out to me, because I can't find any atheist that really knows about the topic that wants to discuss it. I mean, somebody that probably has some kind of a degree in that particular topic. I've talked to Dr. Stephen Law. He might be coming on in December, and I've talked to one or two other people, but for the most part, I can't really find anybody on this particular topic. They just, I don't know, not interested, but I am. So if you know anybody, let me know. And with that, guys, I will see you later. Good night.